Hello, welcome back to the channel. Noah White here again. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys have been enjoying the somewhat random content that's been coming out lately. As I mentioned before, I have a lot of parts that have just been sitting around and I've been meaning to put on. The turbo kit honestly was one of them. That was sitting around for like 3 years before I actually put it on the Lexus. So now, today I'm going to be working on the Civic again. I'm going to try and do the rear disc brake conversion on this car. I do have some Integra trailing arms that I'm going to be using, or Integra brakes, rear brakes that I'm going to be using. I have the brake lines. I have also a Integra brake booster and master cylinder. I don't know if I'll be able to get to that today, but I am going to try to get at least the rear disc brakes on and try and get that whole process sorted out. There's not really much else I'm going to be doing with the Civic today. I will be diving more into the motor soon because I took it around and drove it. If you guys watched my last video, I think it has a blown head gasket, and I did go drive it some more, and sure enough it pushed a whole bunch more coolant into the reservoir. So I'm pretty sure that it has a blown head gasket, and so I'll have to pull the head off, get the head, you know, resurfaced and pressure tested, and get a new head gasket on there and slap that guy back together. But I'll definitely show you guys how to do that. But in today's video, I'm just going to be focusing on the brakes. Hopefully everything goes smooth. I really don't know because this car is old and the parts that I have are pretty rusty by now. They've just been sitting in storage, so I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to go pick them up and get right back to you guys. Alright, I went and dug these out of the storage, and I just wanted to give you guys with the Civic, with Civics or EF chassis. That means the Civic hatchbacks, the CRXs, and my sedan. I just want to give you a quick rundown on what you can use to do a disc brake conversion. The easiest one to do would be to grab disc brakes from a CRX SI. Those will bolt straight up. Just grab the entire trailing arm and bolt them right up. Take the brake lines from the CRX SI and bolt them straight up. And the e-brake cables and all that will be perfectly fine. However, those cars are really hard to find and they're probably the hardest route. The next easiest thing to do, which is what I have here, is to grab the whole trailing arm from 94 through 2001 Integras. You can grab the entire trailing arm and for both sides, and the brake lines from there, and that will all bolt up just fine as well. And then lastly, you can use the trailing arms from a 90 to 93 Integra, a DA Integra. Those will also bolt up just fine. However, you should know that when you use the DA trailing arms, physically they are actually going to widen the track, the rear track. So they're actually a little bit wider than these. So that means that's going to push your wheel out closer to your quarter panel or the fender. So, you know, guys that are running really wide wheels, you might have to rethink that. If you use the DC Integra trailing arms, they're perfectly fine. Aside from that, those are your three options. So CRX SI, DC Integra, which is a 94 through 2001 Integra, or you can use a DA Integra, which is a 90 to 93 Integra. I also want to shed light on an option that most people don't do, because people have been just swapping the entire trailing arms their whole lives, including myself, and generally it is easier to do. However, if you notice, I only have one trailing arm. I don't have a trailing arm on that one. I actually prefer to do it this way, where you just unbolt the hub from the trailing arm, and you see it's just held on by the center nut, like over there on that guy. There's just that center nut right there, and you can see these 4 holes, and in those holes you have these T50 Torx screws. Now naturally people don't try to take these off because these are Loctited in from the factory, and they can be a little bit difficult to get off, especially with the age of these cars and rust and whatever else. But when I went to the junkyard, I was able to pull this one off of the arm. I tried to take that one off the arm, but it just wouldn't come off. So I'm gonna have a bit of a mismatch setup here. I'm actually gonna stick this whole trailing arm onto my Civic, and then I'm actually gonna try to just bolt this up to the trailing arm that's on the right side of my Civic. So, all right, so I'm here on the right side of the car. You can see I got my drum brakes here. All suspension is stock on this car. On this side, since I don't have the trailing arm, my goal is to just take this guy off and I'm going to take it off the exact same way I showed you guys earlier, by removing the one nut on the back and the 4 T50 Torx bolts. I hope they come off easily. I am going to remove this strut here just so I can have some room to get to the back, because if you don't remove this, there's really no room to try and take this stuff off. If you are going to take off the trailing arm like I am on the other side, you just need to remove these 2 bolts up here. You need to remove the let's see, we need to remove the lower, I don't know if it'll get to it, but there's a lower bolt that goes to the bottom of this. You'll need to remove that, and you also need to remove the lower control arm there. You can do it from that side over there, or you can do it from directly underneath this thing. And then lastly is the control arm bolts, or excuse me, control arm bushings. There are 2 bolts on either side of this thing. You can see just one of them right here, the other one's on the other side. And then as you follow that down along under the car, the compensator holes or the compensator arm will also be under there. So I'll try and see if I can show you guys all that stuff. I got lucky and I was able to break free all of these T50 Torx. So they're all Loctited in, so it's gonna be a little bit before I can get them out of here, but they're all broken loose. Alright, got the bolt off the back. See if this thing here is loose now. The only thing we're going to have to do now is to disconnect the e-brake cables. You could probably take apart all of this in here and disconnect it from the back here, but since these cables aren't going to work for the disc brakes, it makes sense to just pull them out completely. So you can do that inside by removing the center console piece. And obviously I don't have an e-brake handle in here, but you would just disconnect your e-brake handle. It's held on by 2 bolts here. That bolt is a 12 and the other 12 right there. Then that should allow you to be able to maneuver it around so you can get these out of the maneuver these out of the e-brake handle. Then the next thing you want to do is to take off these 2 bolts right here. Sorry, my camera angle is messed up. Take off these 2 12s right here, and that should allow you to remove these cables from this here bracket holder, and then you can pull the cables out from underneath the car. So but just to show you that the bolt patterns are exactly the same. You know, the 4T50 bolts are the same. All of those bolts are exactly the same, and as well as the big nut that goes on the back, they're all exactly the same. So the only thing I'm going to do is pull all the brackets off of the DC Integra e-brake cable, and I'll feed it back through that same hole, that hole right there, and then I'm going ahead and bolt this guy up to my trailing arm. I got everything completely bolted up, even transferred over the e-brake cable brackets, and those actually bolted up just fine. And now I'm thinking, from what I remember in the past, that the closest e-brake cables that are, you know, close to being correct are the DC coupe cables, which is what I have. So they actually look like they're going to be perfectly fine. They might be slightly longer than they need to be, maybe like an inch or so, but overall they go in the same location. They all bolted up in the same location, and this side is done now. Obviously these rotors and pads that I'm going to replace, this stuff is just off the car at Pick and Pull, but I just wanted to mainly just get everything bolted up, and then replacing pads and disc are, you know, no problem at all. But brake line is hooked up, everything is fine. Alright, I just want to show you guys the differences between an EF and a DC trailing arm. The EF is on the left, DC one is on the right. I know it appears that it looks a little longer, but I promise you they're the same. They use the exact same trailing arm bushing. All of the stuff will bolt on. Like, I can take these toe or camber arms, and they'll bolt up to both of them. They'll both bolt up to an Integra or an EF. All of this stuff is interchangeable. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I would have liked to just take this hub off alone and then just swap it over to this trailing arm, but that bolt just wasn't coming out. So just gonna have to live with it like this. As I mentioned earlier in the video, you do want to take your Civic compensator arm, which is this guy, and bolt it up into the Integra one. As you can tell, this Integra one is much shorter than this one. If you run the Integra one, you'll end up with pretty severe toe in, meaning the front of the wheels are kind of be like pointed in towards the car, and it just is not going to ride right at all. So I'm going to swap these over, and I'm also going to swap over the stock camber arm into the Integra one here, and I'll go ahead and install these ones later. I haven't cleaned these up and, you know, make sure they spin. I don't want to install them and, you know, they don't spin or nothing like that. Plus these are really easy to install later on. So but yeah, everything is the same. Even the brake lines, you can see the drum brake line is here and the disc brake line is here. They're the exact same brake line. They bolt up exactly the same. So all of these are pretty much very interchangeable cars. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this Integra one bolted up. Yes sir, got the other side on, complete trailing arm, everything bolts right up, no problem. Just got to mess around with trying to line up some of the bolts, but other than that, everything is on. I got everything like the stock Civic toe arm and the stock Civic compensator arm there on the bottom. But aside from that, both sides are on. This side on too. So pretty happy about this. Now some might say that this is a lot of work just to, you know, put some disc brakes on, but I come from a background of road racing and like autocross, so brakes are pretty meaningful to me. So especially with just maintenance and everything, it's way easier to change rotors and pads versus trying to change shoes and drums. So yeah, these turned out great, and I even got the e-brake cables. E-brake cables that ran inside here. They're not bolted up yet, but they are there and they fit perfectly fine. Oh man, excuse me, I probably look a hot mess. It's kind of warm here now, or has been warming up lately, but yeah, got the brakes on. Pretty much everything went exactly as planned. I'm glad I didn't have to really struggle with those T50 bolts too much. They kind of came right out on the stock arm, so all of that is on and together now. The next video I'll probably touch on me installing the Integra master cylinder and or excuse me, the Integra brake booster, which also has the brake master cylinder on it. You can run disc brakes with this stock master cylinder. However, you're gonna have a pretty spongy pedal and it's not really gonna work too well, but they will stop. I've used them before, you know, in a pinch just to get around. However, it's recommended that you use an Integra brake master cylinder, a DA brake master cylinder, or if you're lucky to find a 91 Civic EX sedan, like this sedan, but an EX. Those have, I believe, 7/8 master cylinders, and those will work perfectly fine. But overall, everything went together pretty smoothly. I hope this helps somebody out trying to do disc brake swap on their EF. Granted, this car is, I know, really old and all this information is out there, but just trying to give a modern take on these cars now, because I know that there's younger kids, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids who really don't know what they're doing, and they don't really want to read forums. So I hope that this helps you guys. If you guys have any comments or questions about this swap, please ask me in the comment section below. I will always respond to you guys. I appreciate you guys watching the videos. If you like the video, hit the subscribe button on the way out and hit the like button, share it with your buddies. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.